How are you? And how was your exams? Hope that all of you have performed very well in your exams. And today we are going to see the fifth lesson, that is A Face in the Dark by Ruskin Bond. So you may please take page number 73 in your treasure trove. There is a brief introduction about the story and the author is given. And as I told earlier, the story The Face in the Dark, it is written by Ruskin Bond, and he is an Indian author of British origin or British descent. Descent means origin, and he is a prolific writer. Prolific writer means the person who makes many stories or writes many stories, and the one who makes in abundance. So he wrote many stories, and these stories were very much popular among children and the adults. And the story which we are going to see, that is The Face in the Dark, and the setting of this story, it is in a pine forest and the mountains around the Shimla village. And here we can find that this story, it is a macabre tale, that means causing anxiety and fear among the audience or the reader. The main character of this story, it is Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher. The theme of the story, in a way we can say that the story, it is a supernatural story, and I hope that you know what is supernatural. Supernatural means something beyond the nature. And the story, it is written in the third person because we do not know the author, and the author is the omniscient author. Omniscient author means the one who knows everything, and the story, it is written in the third person narrative. And the setting, as I told, it is in a pine forest, the hills, around the hills there in Shimla village. And if you go through the style of this particular short story, then you can find that it is something very simple, and at the same time the author uses the elements which can cause fear, horror, anxiety among the reader. And the story, it is full of, throughout the story we can notice that different types of imageries, both auditory and visual imageries. And what is the purpose of using visual and auditory imageries in this story? It is to bring supernaturalism and mystery. As I told you earlier, it is a supernatural story, and the elements like supernaturalism and mystery, it has, these both are inevitable in a supernatural story. And the words and the language used in the story, it is something connected with it, which can bring a curiosity, anxiety among the reader. If you take page number 97 in your workbook, there you can notice that the style of the short story, it is given. The language used in the short story, it is very simple, and it helps the author to create a strange atmosphere. And this story, it is having the elements of horror. And what all are the elements we can notice in a horror story or horror movie? You might have watched many horror movies. And what all are the elements in a horror movie or a horror novel or a horror story? Fear, surprise, suspense and mystery. And this story also, we can find all these elements of horror. The title, that is The Face in the Dark, is very apt and suitable for this story because the story, it revolves around Mr. Oliver, the main character, and the face of a boy in the dark. The story, it is set in a pine forest outside Shimla village. And now you may take your workbook and please go through your workbook, and there you can notice some details are given regarding the short story, and you can just see the title, setting, style and theme of the short story. And regarding the author also, a brief introduction is given in your workbook. You may please go through. And now we will see the story in detail. Now you may please take page number 74 in your treasure trove, chapter 5, a face in the dark by Ruskin Bond. First paragraph. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian teacher, was returning to his school late one night on the outskirts of the hill station of Shimla. The main character in this story, it is Mr. Oliver, and his profession was he was a teacher. And the specification about Mr. Oliver, it is given he is an Anglo-Indian teacher. Anglo-Indian means relating both to Britain and India. Means he may be having the mixed ancestors. That means mother may be from Britain and father may be from India. Or he may be having the descent, the British descent, but living in India. That is called Anglo-Indian. He was returning to his school late night. You have to notice the timing. Late night on the outskirts of the hill station of Shimla. Outskirts means the area which surrounds the city, and here the city it is Shimla. So the person he was traveling to or returning to his school. From before Kipling's time, the school had been run on English public school lines. So now we will understand about something about the school and the features of the school. Before Kipling's time, who is Kipling mentioned here? Here Kipling, he is Rudyard Kipling, a famous English poet. And before his times, this particular school where Mr. Oliver was teaching was run by English lines, English public school lines. So it followed an English syllabus, and the boys, most of them from wealthy Indian families. So the students, those who were studying in that particular school, were from wealthy Indian families, and they wore blazers, caps and ties. Life magazine in a feature on India had once called it the Eton of the East. Eton of the East. Eton, it is a school there in Britain, and it was very famous school. And it was in West, that means Britain. And here, this school there in Shimla, that is called by Life magazine as the Eton of the East. Why? This school also was very much famous like the Eton school there in Britain. And the students, those who studied in this school, were very rich and they were from wealthy families. And Mr. Oliver was teaching there in this particular school for several years. So that is about the school. Now you may please take next paragraph. The Shimla Bazaar with its cinemas and restaurants was about 3 miles from the school. So the Shimla Bazaar, or the city Shimla, it was not a small city or a small village, but it was having the features of the city, that is the cinemas, restaurants and a big market, and it was 3 miles away from the school. The school was 3 miles away from the city called Shimla. Oliver, a bachelor, so he was a bachelor. Bachelor means the one who is not married. Usually strolled into the town in the evening. Strolled means walk. So he always used to walk towards the town or the city, and returning when after dark. Late night he used to return. All the evening he used to walk towards the city, and he used to return late night or in the dark. And that time he normally took the shortcut. That means when he would take a shortcut through the pine forest. So whenever he returns late night, then he used to take the shortcut through the pine forest. So the third paragraph. When there was a strong wind, the pine trees made sad, eerie sounds that kept most people to the main road. Eerie sound means the sound which causes fear or the strange sound. So you just imagine that you are walking through a pine forest or a forest alone, then hearing the sounds, strange sounds, then you may get terrified. The same way people used to feel the same thing. So normally no one used to walk through the pine forest after getting dark. Late night no one dared to walk through the pine forest. Why? The trees used to make such a strange and fearful sounds that kept most people to the main road. So most of the people, they used to travel on the main road. Only very few people, they travel through the pine forest after getting dark. But we noticed that Mr. Oliver, he used to take the shortcut through the pine forest when he returns after late night. Now, but Mr. Oliver was not a nervous or an imaginative man. So he was not just like other people. He was a courageous person and he was not that much nervous. There are many people, they are not able to walk in the dark. Even some of you also may be having the same problem. In the dark, we are afraid to walk alone. So there are some people. But Mr. Oliver, he was not such kind of person. He was not a nervous person. And he was not afraid of anything. And he was not an imaginative person. Imaginative person means, I will give one example. You just imagine that you are walking through a pine forest late night. That time, many imaginations may come to your mind. The horror scenes, the scenes that you have watched in the movies, or the scenes that you read in the stories or the novels. So the ghost is coming, or someone is coming and taking you away. So such kind of feelings, imaginations may come. But here, Mr. Oliver, he was not such a kind of person who was having such kind of imaginations. So he was not a nervous and imaginative person. So he used to travel. Other people, they were not ready to travel through the pine forest. But Mr. Oliver, he was a courageous person and he was not an imaginative person. So he used to travel through the pine forest even late night. Then he carried a torch and its gleam, the batteries were running down, moved fitfully down the narrow forest path. So now Mr. Oliver, he was returning to his school after his evening walk and he carried a torch and its gleam means the small light. The batteries were running down. The battery, it was running down, moved fitfully down the narrow forest path. So here, fitfully means in an irregular manner. The reason is that the batteries were running down. So the gleam, the light, it was fitfully moving. That means in an irregular manner, the light was moving down narrow forest path. The reason is that the batteries were getting down. When its flickering light fell in the figure of a boy who was sitting alone on a rock, Mr. Oliver stopped. Flickering means the unsteady light. When the unsteady light fell upon a boy, then Mr. Oliver stopped. The boy was sitting on a rock. You just imagine that situation. Mr. Oliver, late night, he was traveling through the pine forest and he was carrying a torch with him. And what was the speciality of the torch? The batteries were getting down. So the gleam, it fitfully, in an irregular manner, it fell on the narrow path. Suddenly, the light, it fell upon a boy. The unsteady light, it fell upon a boy. He was sitting on a rock. So Mr. Oliver, he found a boy sitting on a rock. Then he suddenly stopped. Why? Because the boys were not allowed to sit or be outside after getting dark. But here Mr. Oliver stopped and surprised by seeing a boy there outside after getting dark. "What are you doing out here, boy?" asked Mr. Oliver sharply, moving closer so that he could recognize the miscreant. Miscreant means the one who behaves badly or not a normal way. The person who behaves badly or not in a normal way. So here, Mr. Oliver, as a responsible teacher, he is asking to the boy what he was doing there late night. And the boys were not supposed to be there after getting dark, but the boy was sitting. So the teacher, Mr. Oliver, he was very curious and he was very surprised, and he is asking to the boy what he was doing there late night. Mr. Oliver sharply moving closer so that he wanted to recognize the boy, and the boy may be studying in his school, in his hostel. So he wanted to recognize the boy, so he just made a movement so that he could easily recognize the miscreant. Then, but even as he approached the boy, Mr. Oliver sensed that something was wrong. As he was approaching the boy, as he was getting very closer to the boy, then Mr. Oliver, he felt something wrong with the boy. And what is that? The boy appeared to be crying. His head hung down. He held his face in his hands and his body shook convulsively. So Mr. Oliver, as he moved towards the boy, then he noticed something strange, something wrong with the boy. What is that? The boy was crying and his head hung down. He held his face in his hands. So the boy was keeping his head in his hand and in a bending position he was sitting. Hung down means hanging. The head was hanging down and he just supported his head with his hands and his body shook convulsively. Convulsively means in an uncontrolled manner the body was shivering because of crying. It was a strange soundless weeping and Mr. Oliver felt distinctly uneasy. So the boy was crying and it was something very strange and soundless weeping. So the teacher, Mr. Oliver, he felt uneasy, not comfortable with the situation, and he wanted to know more about the boy. So from this paragraph you can understand that Mr. Oliver, as a responsible teacher, he wanted to know about the boy. So he just moved closer to the boy and asked him what he was doing there late night. Then as he moved close to the boy, he noticed that there is something wrong with the boy. And what was wrong with the boy? The boy was weeping or crying there, and he held his head in his hands and he was shivering. By seeing the crying and weeping of the boy, Mr. Oliver, the teacher, he felt uneasy. That is enough for today, and we will discuss the rest of the story in the next class. As I told you earlier, you may please go through your workbook and just study the theme or the style, the setting of the story, and just go through the story that we discussed so far. Thank you. Have a nice day.